Hello, friends and comrades at the public meeting of the Kiniма in Thessaloniki. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person today. Hopefully I'll be coming to Greece again in the coming months to discuss with people and to learn from your very significant struggle that's happening at the moment. Right now in Ireland, like I think in a lot of countries across Europe, there is a huge attention at what's happening in Greece. It's probably the biggest issue happening outside of Ireland politically that is widely watched by wide sections of the population in a very, very long time. And I think for lots of people active in the movements against austerity, active against the water charges, the election of SYRIZA, the SYRIZA-led government, has been a real inspiration, a hope for people. I think it has Europe-wide significance. It is historic to have a left government elected in the context of the domination of neoliberal ideas, the move to the right of the so-called centre-left, the so-called social democratic parties. And in particular, it breached a wall, which is what the Greek people did. It breached a hole in the wall saying that there is no alternative to austerity, to neoliberalism, that old slogan of Maggie Thatcher. And it gave people hope that the left can not just resist austerity, but can win governmental power and can fight to fundamentally change our society. Events now, in terms of the negotiations in the past weeks, are also being watched extremely carefully. People have learned the lesson that any notion that we have a democratic system in Europe is completely wrong. That, as Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, said, there are no democratic choices possible outside of the European treaties, which means any democratic choices other than the acceptance of austerity are not accepted by the ruling class, the bankers, the bondholders, and their governments in Europe. That effectively people see that the Greek election results have been annulled by the attack dog of the European Central Bank, the threat to collapse the Greek banking system, that the Greek people have been stabbed in the back by the Irish government and the Spanish government, which have chosen to line up with the interests of the 1% as opposed to representing the 99% in this country or elsewhere in Europe, and by the actions of the Troika, now renamed the institutions. I think people understand that what's happened is a defeat, that it's a lost battle, but it's a lost battle in an ongoing Europe-wide class war that can still be won by the majority of people across Europe, by working class people. I think there are many lessons to be drawn, and people are watching what's happening, not as disinterested observers, but in order to draw lessons. And I think what comes out clearly is that the rules of the Euro, of the Economic and Monetary Union, the rules of the EU, are a straitjacket for austerity, neoliberal, right-wing capitalist policies. Those rules and that straitjacket must be broken, regardless of what threats are thrown at people and regardless of the consequences, for example, being pushed out of the euro. In Ireland at the moment, you have a very significant struggle against austerity. The floodgates have opened on the issue of the water charges. All of the accumulated anger and discontent over 6 and 7 years of brutal austerity has now exploded on this issue, and because people feel able to struggle on it without the blockage of the trade union leaders and the bureaucracy. And so you've just, in the last months, you've had a transformation of the political situation in Ireland. You've had huge mobilisations that we haven't had for years. You had 100,000 on the streets in October, you had 200,000 on the streets in November, you had close to 100,000 on the streets in December during a working day, during working time. And we're a few weeks away now from the next very, very significant protest on March 21st. In particular, we're preparing for a massive boycott of the hated water charges, which are a new austerity tax. There's huge meetings across the country, huge levels of self-organisation in local communities, in local street meetings, which all point towards there being a very significant boycott of the charge. I think we can definitely win something like 40% of people to refuse to pay, but we're fighting to make that even harder and to make the charge and the austerity measures entirely uncollectible. In the last few weeks, last 3 weeks, we've seen a big response of repression by the state in response to this movement. 23 people in the area that I was elected from, the area that I represent, have been arrested, including myself. I had 6 policemen come to my door at 7 o'clock in the morning to arrest me for participating in a peaceful protest. A 16-year-old had 10 police arrest him at his house for participating in the same peaceful protest. In total, 23 people, and we're waiting to see if any criminal prosecution is brought. And also at the same time, there are now 4 people in prison for between a month and 2 months simply for participating in a different peaceful protest against water charges. So it's a very severe attack on people's democratic rights to protest, on people's civil liberties. But why it's happening is because the establishment is extremely scared. They know we're on the verge of defeating the water charges, and they know that will give people huge confidence to take on the entire austerity agenda and the right-wing establishment, the capitalist class in this country. They're particularly scared because people are engaged in politics on a mass scale outside of the framework of capitalist democracy, not just accepting that you go and vote for parties like the Labour Party, like PASOK in Greece, every few years and get sold out and then get demoralised and then do it all over again, but saying that people have enormous power themselves, also outside of the framework of elections. And so this whole movement and that sense of power it's given to people lays the potential for major change politically in Irish society. We think a major radical anti-capitalist fighting left force can and is being built at the moment. We think a major parliamentary representation, much increased, can result in the next general election, and with a view to having a radical left government in Ireland in the next number of years is a realistic prospect, based on the kind of struggle outside of the Parliament that we've seen so far, that has already pushed the government back so far and has struck so much fear into it. And it's one of the reasons that people watch what happened so closely in Greece, to draw the lessons, to then go into the battle with a very consistent, thoroughgoing view that austerity, the rules of capital, must be broken, and that we must have a fundamental restructuring of the economy and society in the interest of the majority, fundamental democratic and socialist change, and that has to be part of a Europe-wide battle, breaking from the rules of the EU, the rules of the euro, establishing and moving in the direction of socialist societies, deepening connections between all those countries that elect left governments, and with the strategy of building a very different type of Europe, a Europe where the millions come before the millionaires.